Mister Rogers with his good neighborhood, right? I loved Mister Rogers. I loved sitting on the floor with my daughter and watching Mister Rogers and his kind of happy, good neighbors. And it was amazing that in his simple but direct way, he would talk about nuclear war and race relations, and he was polite and thoughtful when anybody came to visit, such as the mailman. And I loved that when he first arrived, he had the same routine of hanging up his jacket and putting his sweater on and putting his shoes and then putting on his slippers. It was, for me, a wonderful example of a good neighborhood, of a good man, and he introduced all sorts of difficult topics, nuclear war, race relations, and it just seemed normal. Many years later, when I was in a workshop on my 40th birthday, I heard something that changed me and really gave me part of my purpose in life. It was called strengthening the fabric of goodwill. Now that's the short strengthening the fabric of goodwill. It was actually delivered very kind of fact of matter. Now, the way was explained that the fabric of goodwill that encircled the world, like a piece of fabric, if you imagine a piece of fabric that wraps around the world, that is you. It's pieces of you. Each of us are one strand in that fabric, and it goes all the way around the world. The millions and billions of us create this fabric of goodwill that exists in the world. And quite a concept. And how does that fit with being a good neighbor? Well, it's actually easier to talk about it by talking about being a good neighbor. You see, when there's a flood or there's an accident or there's something going wrong in the neighborhood, it's easy to see people will reach out and help. You'll see it after a flood. People will get together and work shoulder to shoulder, man and woman and child. They'll just help. Now that's actually goodwill. That's being a good neighbor. If there's a fire, they will do the same thing, helping people move things, get things out of the way, or help them survive and get out. Goodwill exists. It's tangible. We can actually see it, but usually we only notice it when there is a disaster of some sort, a heavy snowstorm, a firestorm, heavy rainfall, floods, when people immediately respond to help each other. Now that's being a good neighbor. That's about goodwill. But most of the time, those things don't happen to us face to face. We see it on television, and rarely does it hit our actual neighborhood. So notice it. There are other ways in which goodwill exists. It's the simple act of helping someone when their arms are full of opening the door. Now, before the days of us wearing masks and being very careful about who we speak to, I was reminded about goodwill with a simple thing that happened. I used to go to a Starbucks store and buy the same coffee, 5 days a week. I'd be there picking up my coffee, double espresso, and that was it. They would always say, "What's your order?" And then they'd write your name on the cup, and then you'd stand and pay and stand in line waiting for your double espresso turned into an Americano. That was me. That was my order. Now, I decided when I had done this workshop to see how people react when I'm being a good neighbor, or try an experiment if you want, because by now you know I'm very curious about how people react, and I'm very curious about my own responses. And so I would say good morning and smile at people. Good morning and smile. For weeks and weeks, months, in fact, I had been seeing the same people at approximately the same time of day, in both sunshine and rain. Well, Vancouver has lots of rain and lots of sunshine. And finally, one day, one man responded back. He said, "Good morning" back to me. And I said, "Good morning." And he said, "Do I know you?" Because I'd been saying good morning to him. And I said, "Well, actually, you do know me, but you don't really." And he went, "Huh?" Well, I said, "You and I buy coffee here 5 days a week at the same time, approximately the same time. And we've been doing that for about a year now." He said, "Yeah, I see you." And I said, "So I decided to say good morning to people." And so he said, "Good morning, I'm Rob." And I said, "Good morning, I'm Jeff." And he said, "Oh, how do you spell that?" And I said, "Well, in my Jeff, I'm English. It's Geoff." He said, "Oh." He said, "Well, actually, maybe," and he kind of smiled and chuckled, "we should do coffee." And we laughed because we're in a coffee shop. He said, "Maybe we'll have lunch here one day." And we talked about that, and we agreed that on Wednesday we'd come and have lunch together. Now, people in the queue waiting for their coffee also heard that, and they would smile and say hi, and then I heard my name, and I reached for my cup, and instead of having Jeff, it had Geoff, which is my name. And I looked up, and Rod behind the counter said, "Good morning, Jeff." And I said, "Good morning." And my little experiment showed that, you can be a good neighbor and strengthen the fabric of society or goodwill just by acknowledging people. Now, most of the time, we don't notice when we are strengthening the fabric of goodwill. It's simple things, really, that make and help hold society together, that fabric that makes it a good place to be, right? It's like opening the door for the person at the coffee shop that's got 4 coffees balanced and a bag of goodies to go with it. It's helping and holding the elevator door open for the person that's running for the elevator. It's in the traffic letting somebody move in front of you because they've been stuck on the inside. It's simple things. It's like acknowledging the bank teller by using their name and saying thank you, but looking them in the eyes instead of looking at your phone or looking at what they've just done for you. So that acknowledges, I don't know about you, but there's something that happens to me when somebody looks in my eyes and says my name. Try it. Now, I've actually experimented with this in several ways. My wife and I go grocery shopping together, and I'm usually pushing the cart, and we talk about what she's buying. We fill the cart. Like everyone else, we go up to the queue, and I put the bags, because now we use reusable bags, first, and then I put all the groceries up. She's standing there. And then I move the cart past, and I'm now behind where they come off after they've been checked. And I say, "Do you mind if I pack?" And usually the smile on the grocery clerk's face is like, "No, I don't mind." I say, "Hey, yeah, I'll do it." And I always make a point of seeing and finding their name and saying, "Okay, Jackie or Fred or Pamela," and I load the groceries and I put them in the cart. It's a simple thing, but it makes a difference. It's a small thing. never looking at them makes somebody feel like they're a machine, that they don't matter, that they aren't a human being. We're all human beings. We all matter. What happens when, or how, when there is a crisis, it's natural to pitch in. We've seen movies of neighbors helping each other in a flood or in a fire, or people picking up animals in the fire and putting them in cars and helping people that way. Now, let me tell you about when I first arrived in Canada. I arrived, my cousin picked me up, he prearranged for an apartment and drove me there and dropped me off because my train had been late and he was going off to work. So there I am outside this 2-story, and I'm moving things into the lobby one piece at a time. And this slightly elderly gentleman comes out and says, "Oh, just arrived?" And I said, "Yes." And I noticed his accent. He was British. I said, "Yeah, I've just arrived in Canada." He said, "Well, let me hold the door for you." And he held the door, and I brought everything into the lobby. He said, "Okay, now we don't have an elevator, so I'll take the small stuff. Which suite are you in?" And I told him. And I went up and I opened the suite, and then somebody else, and suddenly there were 3 of us moving stuff up. I only had small suitcases, but I had 1 trunk, and we lifted that up together. And we introduced each other, and it suddenly felt okay and very normal. It was a wonderful experience. I still remember Fred with his Cockney accent standing there. I can see his rather droopy eyes and thinning hair. He was wonderful. Now, I'm sure it's happened to you in some way or another where people have helped you and they have put themselves out. If you want to strengthen the fabric of goodwill, or how can you help strengthen the fabric of goodwill, is by showing up, being yourself, always, kind of give people a smile instead of a frown, and operate from the place of, I'm curious. I'm curious about you. The news and the newspapers and the articles have been trying to teach us to fear the world. And having masks has allowed us to, fear everyone and not talk to anyone. Going through this pandemic together has been very difficult. It has damaged the fabric of the world, this goodwill. You can't see anybody smile. You can't actually hear them very well. And it's a strange thing. Somebody standing in front of you with a blue or a black or even a mask with a smile painted on it is not the same as seeing a real human face. But they can hear your voice and they can see the smile in your eyes. So, smile. Act politely. Our society has had a shock. We need to re-strengthen that society. We need to give it a help. There is some places where it's very evident that the fabric of goodwill has been or had been attempted to be destroyed. Russia's attack on sovereign Ukraine, the sovereign people of Ukraine, and their damage to their homes and to their society, and the loss of the men and the women and now the orphans. It's just you see it, and it is heart-rending. It is difficult to see. The interesting thing is that assault has actually strengthened the natural love and affection between all Ukrainians. They are doing it naturally, strengthening the fabric of goodwill. You know, at Christmas, it's natural for us to, smile a bit more, be polite a bit more, buy small gifts for our friends, or even large gifts for our friends. We kind of help each other. And it happens at Thanksgiving as well. Just the small acts of writing a Christmas card instead of sending an email, making a telephone call and telling someone that you care about them, or asking them how they are. You'd be surprised the number of people who actually do need help. Now, if you are lonely and you need help, the way that you can strengthen yourself and actually strengthen society is to find a resource, phone, or make a connection with people. Not only do you help yourself, you help the fabric of society. You help all of us. Taking care of yourself is the first step in strengthening the fabric of goodwill, in strengthening society. Respect people. I think one of the great challenges is that once respect disappears in society, respect for people's opinion and for what is important to them, we set up a competition in which nobody wins. I believe that it is most important that people have the ability and the opportunity to express themselves, that it's imperative that they have freedom of expression. And when you suppress goodwill, understanding seems to disappear. Now, unfortunately, the masks and the pandemic have gotten in a way that has kind of choked off this natural expression we have of goodwill and trying to take care of each other. You might ask, well, how can you strengthen someone? It's easy, and yet we don't think about it. It is that extra step at work when somebody asks for help, or in fact going up and helping someone if you know what you can do for them, if you can help them with a problem. It's easy to get selfish because the pressures of the world drown out the goodwill that exists. Respect is the biggest gift. Acknowledgement is another big gift. Listening to someone and being curious about them, being a witness to their life at that moment in time, is a very big gift. It's a gift of goodwill to them. And it will be extended naturally if you do it. It has to start somewhere. I do it by doing this podcast and leading workshops. All of my workshops are designed to strengthen the individual, to show up, to be respectful, to respect themselves, and give themselves space in the world. The benefit of a long life has brought me to understand that one of the most difficult things in the world is standing up and showing up and revealing who I am to the world. Most of us are not prepared to reveal ourselves. We fear judgment, we fear criticism, we fear ridicule, we fear people's judgment. The truth is, as far as I know, people judge you anyway, so projecting what you think they should know doesn't work anyway. Most of us know when there is BS going on and someone's not being themselves. So how can you strengthen the fabric of goodwill? Be yourself, smile, be polite, respect the people that help you on a regular basis, say thank you. This is really from your spirit, from your soul. I believe that we can help most. I want to relate a short story it's very short, from the Dalai Lama. It's quite simply this. If you think you are too small to make a difference, spend a night alone with a mosquito. Well said, Dalai Lama. All the best. Take care, Jeffrey.